I am Steve Deace back there. Now they're the ones risking their lives. Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre are back there in the studio. Gentlemen, be careful over there. So to give you guys an update, they found 3 more massive nests yesterday. Aaron, you said you got attacked this morning, correct? You even sent me a video. That sucker was fairly plump. That was not a tiny little yellow jacket that went after you today.
I was just sitting at the computer minding my own business when looking up at the monitor I have right here. It just kind of arose over the monitor like some sort of military gunship and came right at my face. I moved away. It followed me. It was horrifying.
Bigger, faster, stronger.
Right?
I zapped it multiple times. I electrocuted it multiple times. It took me getting my pliers and squeezing it for it to finally die.
Are you kidding me? You had to get pliers?
Yeah. It was like a tick. That's how you kill ticks. This thing is supposed to be a yellow jacket. I electrocuted it. I mean, it was starting to smoke, but it was still going.
Todd, you're sitting back there in the catbird seat, man. Have your head on a swivel, brother. That would be my advice for you today.
Is this Ant-Man and the Wasp Part 3? What's going on here?
What's going on here is I actually, in a twisted and typical Steve Deace contrarian way, I actually think this is a positive development in that they have finally figured out what the sources of all of this activity is. And, these things are getting very ornery on the way out. So I think this is actually a sign of making progress, the increased aggression, because I think that they realize that the superior species has had enough of them claiming squatters' rights over our airways. And so at least that's what I'm going with, knowing, however, I still may be in this little adjunct studio for the foreseeable future, just to warn everybody, because I'm not going back in there until there's at least been 2 or 3 days that nobody has seen anything, or the temperature drops to like 60 degrees outside, whichever comes first, right?
I'll try to, tame them like circus animals or something like that if they come along. Maybe we can't we all get along? Maybe we can.
You don't even notice this.
Maybe
we always have to point it out to you. You're like not even paying attention. All right. So have your head on a swivel, man. I'm just warning you. Have your head on a swivel. All right. Coming up on the program today at the bottom of the hour, Dr. Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins University is going to join us. And he put out a thread and also a column for the Wall Street Journal asking about natural immunity. And I think this is one of the key arguments that we have to win here up against COVID stands. So we're going to ask him some questions about why the denial of natural immunity. That's coming up at the bottom of the hour. Next hour, you keep hearing this is primarily now a pandemic of the vaccinated. So over the last couple of days, in what I have left of what's called spare time, I have gone to the dashboards of all 50 U.S. states to try to figure out what kind of information is out there, because CDC does not provide this, shockingly, not at all. So we have to do this individually by state. I suppose you could do this on an even more granular level by county. I don't have the time for that. But I did go and give an exhaustive look at all 50 U.S. states to find out, first of all, who's even giving you information on the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And then the states that do break it down, what do their numbers actually say? We will go over that with you for fake news or not. I'm not going to draw any conclusions from this information until at least I hear the conclusions that Todd and Aaron will draw from it after we're finished with this rundown on fake news or not next hour. And then for Pop Culture Tuesday, we're going to look at the smashing success of Shang-Chi, a character almost no one had ever heard of until the movie was announced a couple of years ago, and still almost nobody knew anything about until the movie came out 2 weeks ago. And now it is poised to be, at least until we see what happens with Spider-Man at the end of the year, the #1 movie of 2021. And now we're seeing studios, with the success of Shang-Chi, they're actually moving up release dates now, thinking, hey, maybe if we have a good movie, people will actually go. Let's try that. Maybe the reason they're staying home is we haven't produced a lot of good movies. So we'll get into the conversation about the secret success of Shang-Chi and what it may mean both about the future of movies, but also the future of the MCU. We'll get into that with Pop Culture Tuesday coming up at the very final segment of the program. But before we get to all of that, of course, we begin, as we always do, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Who Could Have Seen This Coming? The Atlantic has gained a substantial track record of being the worst magazine of the pandemic, repeatedly cheering on countries as an example for the United States to follow, while not reporting while those countries have a huge uptick in cases and deaths, and jeering the United States as being some sort of backwater third world crapfest who can't get the virus under control. But yesterday, columnist David Zweig, who has been one of the lone coronavirus skeptics at the publication, got the inside scoop on a new paper written by researchers at Harvard Tufts Medical Center and the VA healthcare system. Zweig detailed the findings of the new study in his essay for The Atlantic titled, "Our Most Reliable Pandemic Number is Losing Meaning." The researchers in the paper pored over and analyzed nearly 50,000 COVID hospital admissions at more than 100 VA hospitals across the country. They checked to see whether each patient required supplemental oxygen or had a blood oxygen level below 94%. That's the criteria used by the National Institutes of Health as being severe COVID. If either of those conditions was met, the authors classified that patient as having a moderate to severe disease. Otherwise, the case was considered mild or symptomatic. The story continues, quote, "The study found that from March 2020 through early January 2021, before vaccination was widespread and before the Delta variant had arrived, the proportion of patients with mild or asymptomatic disease was 36%. From mid-January through the end of June 2021, however, that number rose to 48%. In other words, the study suggests that roughly half of all the hospitalized patients showing up on COVID data dashboards in 2021 may have been admitted for another reason entirely or had only a mild presentation of the disease." Learning Chinese today, today's phrase is, "told ya."
跟你说了。
Dr. Anthony Fauci says showing proof of vaccination to travel anywhere may be the administration's next step.
It seems to me crazy that a year and a half into this, I can still get on a plane to Boston or California and nobody's going to check me. Do you think that needs to change?
Well, that's under consideration, certainly.
He was also asked what the threshold for reaching herd immunity is.
Joe, we don't know.
A new review published at The Lancet by an international team of scientists concludes there's no evidence COVID booster shots will do any good. Quote, "Current evidence does not, therefore, appear to show a need for boosting the general population, in which efficacy against severe disease remains high." In completely unrelated news, Denver Broncos right guard Graham Glasgow was taken to the hospital after their game against the Giants on Sunday evening out of an abundance of caution for an irregular heartbeat. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis made an announcement yesterday to counter the Biden administration's new actions on vaccine mandates.
If a government agency in the state of Florida forces a vaccine as a condition to employment, that violates Florida law, and you will face a $5,000 fine for every single violation.
Moving on, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken testified in front of Congress yesterday over the Afghanistan debacle.
Thank you for very rightly putting the spotlight on concerns about the LGBTQI plus community in Afghanistan and the particular threat that they may find themselves under. This is something that we are focused on.
He also blamed the previous administration for this one's abject failure.
Thank you, Congressman. We inherited a deadline. We did not inherit a plan.
In other odds and ends, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez showed up at the annual satanic ritual known as the Met Gala, which costs $30,000 per person to attend, wearing a dress emblazoned with the words, "Tax the Rich." In California, today is Recall Day. Let's check in on how that's going with KTLA TV in Los Angeles.
Several people tell us they showed up to vote this morning in the special California governor recall election and were told that computers showed they had already cast their ballots. So what?
And finally, recording artist Nicki Minaj, she of the hit songs like I Endorse These Strippers and Stupid Ho, among many others, tweeted this last night. My cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied, end quote. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's montage brought to you by SweatBlock. You know, there's never a great time to be all sweaty. We've all been there, and it seems to happen at the worst possible times. Maybe if you're in the middle of doing some public speaking or a job interview. How about a first date? That's why you want to tame the swamp monster. Here's the cure. SweatBlock antiperspirant. First of all, they're wipes. You wipe them on your pits at night before bedtime, get up the next morning, shower, do all the normal things you do to get ready for the day, and you should be good to go for several days, sometimes for up to a week. I've tried the SweatBlock antiperspirant, and it is stronger than even clinical antiperspirants out there. I tried it even on one of the hottest days of the Iowa summer while we were off for Aaron's paternity leave, and it more than held up and held its own. So I have personally tried these products and can vouch for how well they work to help, well, block sweat. That's why they call it SweatBlock. Right now, I get 20% off when you go to sweatblock.com, just like it sounds, sweatblock.com, and use the promo code DEACE, D-E-A-C-E, at sweatblock.com with the promo code DEACE. Today in the overtime, we are going to be discussing a thread I put out on Twitter this morning. The reason why we're going to be discussing it in overtime is because if we had a brutally honest conversation about what indeed is the cause for this data, we wouldn't be able to post that program on any social media platform. So instead, we will set it aside to discuss it for apparently only the administration. The Biden administration is allowed to openly go out there and say, you need to get that we need to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. Which if I'd even said just a couple of months ago on a platform like Twitter or Facebook, that if you're vaccinated, you are not protected, as the administration is currently saying in its messaging. If I had said this even a month or two ago, I'd have been suspended, if not outright banned from Facebook and Twitter for making such a charge. But the Biden administration apparently gets away with making such claims. So therefore, we're going to have the open and honest conversation this data requires. What is that data? Well, so far in the first 2 weeks of September, cases in the U.S. are up over 300% from where they were the first 2 weeks of last September. So far in the U.S., deaths in the U.S. are up 155% higher than they were in the first 2 weeks of last September. I don't know how many science textbooks you all read in school, how much you studied the scientific process, but that is not how a vaccination program is supposed to work. So how is this happening? We will have a brutally honest conversation about the possibilities of what this means coming up in the overtime today. Again, and you can get access to that today at blazetv.com/DEACE, D-E-A-C-E. And that's where you can go and watch it later today. We will record it right after today's program for you at blazetv.com/DEACE. And that's where you can go to become a Blaze TV subscriber at a reduced rate today at blazetv.com/DEACE so that you do not miss that conversation. Let's get to the rest of what is in Aaron's montage. It sort of seems like the fix is in California, guys, or am I just overreacting? Is this right-wing media? You know, KTLA, is this right-wing media, as CNN said yesterday, again, claiming voting irregularities in California? Your thoughts, gentlemen?
Who's going to hold them accountable?
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's asked and answered. Until there's pain, they're never going to learn. They know that they own the moment. I'm encouraged that we finally saw in New York some protests in the streets, but it's going to take extended protests at every level and every business, at every hospital that tries to fire nurses. Those protests are just the beginning, and until there is a level of pain that they don't believe you can or will inflict, it's not going to stop. And certainly not in California.
I think the fact that the White House is allowing Joe Biden, and I think at one point Kamala was supposed to be out there as well, but the fact that they're allowing him to go out there and campaign today, that's a pretty clear indication that at least in Newsom's camp that they're pretty confident by hook or by crook they're going to pull this thing out. It's just, I mean, time is a flat circle, guys. I was about to say asked and answered as well. Time is a flat circle. Oh, I went to the polling place and it was show that I already voted. How many of our colleagues around the country, ex-Californians, have posted on social media that they got not one but two, maybe multiple ballots for this recall election? How many of those stories have we seen? So, of course, let's say the most innocent explanation is that the California elections are so mismanaged that these types of things happen. That's still not very encouraging, if you will. So I don't know if we'll ever know for sure whether it was a fix or whether it was just the Democrat machine out there flexing its actual get out the vote muscle. But when you show them, a la what Todd was just saying, when you show them that nobody's going to be held accountable if your elections suck, if you show them that nobody's going to be held accountable, who needs a get out the vote operation when you've got to get out the fraud operation? And yes, I said that out loud. That's the lesson that we're learning here. By the way, do we know who won the Iowa Democrat caucuses of 2020 yet?
And fraud or not, this is just biblical at this point. This is we want Barabbas. Look at that place.
That'll preach.
It's an absolute toilet bowl, and they say, yeah, we're good.
Ed, Todd, you're making a profound point there. Let's just pretend for 1 minute. I don't want to park on this for too long, Steve. I'm sorry. Let's just pretend.
Hey, I went there first. It's okay. Go ahead.
Let's pretend for 1 minute that these elections are going to be 100% secure, 100% safe, and 100% just completely above board, the likes of which we have not seen in the 21st century.
That might be worse. That's the point you're making, right?
That would be worse.
Yes.
Because at this point, the Democrat machine and Democrats in California are like, oh, crap. Literally in the street. I just stepped on it. I don't want anybody saying that a Republican or anybody seeing that a Republican or anything other than a Democrat machine can do anything differently at this point. I know I just dodged 3 piles of human feces on my way into work in San Francisco this morning. I don't want to admit, though, that my favorite political party screwed all of this up. I think that's the result that we still might see there.
Yep.
You know, our buddy Konstantinos Roditis has been sending us the updates that he has on the data from the for the elder campaign, and I just respond with 2 words when he sends these to me: "Get out." Those are the only 2 words. I don't give him. And you guys know I love data, and I can go back and forth in the minutia. Nope. My only response is get out. Another good friend of mine told me this morning. His wife has a documented recovered case of COVID, and she's pregnant now and scheduled to deliver here in about a month. And he wanted to get her, they live in California too. He wanted to get her a pregnancy massage as a gift. And they won't see her because she's not vaccinated. Even though the 2 groups that are showing the greatest danger signs for adverse side effects are side effects involving myocarditis among young men, which may or may not be the case going on with Broncos guard Graham Glasgow, former Michigan Wolverine, by the way, or in addition to that are women reproductive health, female reproductive health. So natural immunity doesn't matter. The fact that she's scheduled to deliver in a month doesn't matter. That they still won't see her without being fully vaccinated. I mean, to me, unless you are specifically called to mission, I don't know why anyone would voluntarily live in places like this. I mean, there's other places to work, other places to live. Unless you know, if you work in the film industry, like this buddy of mine does, he doesn't really have anywhere else to go. Okay, but unless it's something unique like that, or you are missionally called to serve this particular era of heathen, I don't know why you would voluntarily live in a place like that. And subject yourself to that kind of tyranny. I kind of feel like, you know, the old Sam Kinison line about starving in Africa in the 80s. You know, I mean, move where the freedom is, move where the liberty is. And I don't think people, I don't know, folks. I can't wait till we bring Marty Makary on here at the bottom of the hour, because if Fauci cannot answer, now he's the nation's leading expert, folks. That's the catchphrase, right? That's the mantra. The nation's leading infectious disease expert. We are facing our worst infectious disease outbreak in 100 years. And on Sunday, he could not answer for us why people with recovered infections needed to still get vaccinated. And now he cannot answer for us what herd immunity is. Folks, those are only like two of the 3 or 4 most important questions for somebody in his line of work. He's not treating patients, guys. He's looking at this whole cloth from a population health standpoint. It's not like he's bogged down with patients, half of them apparently that in the hospitals don't need to be there, according to the study that we got from the Atlantic yesterday. And as Aaron pointed out, they created the original COVID dashboard. This has been one of the worst panic porn pimps for COVID from day one. And now they're publishing an article saying they've got hands on a study that shows this year, maybe more than half of what we counted as hospitalizations didn't need to be so. And that's the original rationale for why we had to shut down everything from the very beginning. I told you all last year, this was the dumbest, most immoral policy. We've had dumber policies. We've had more immoral policies. We've never had dumber and immoral, worse than this combined. It's the worst ever in history of this country. Maybe all of Western civilization, maybe freaking human history. One of the greatest scams since Adam and Eve in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. And now we're sitting here. We're sitting here with 2/3 of the American population fully vaccinated, over 80% of our seniors, the most vulnerable population, fully vaccinated, and we're sitting here with 300% more cases than we had this time last year. And the nation's chief infectious disease expert can only reply with, I have no idea why people fully recovered still need to get vaccinated, and I can't tell you when we reach herd immunity. I can't tell you when it's over. I can't tell you when we win. I don't know. We're way past tar and feathering time here. We're way past, here's your George Costanza tap, Tony. Take your early retirement. You don't know. You don't know the answers to those things, but I want to dictate whether you can travel across state lines or not. I want to dictate whether you can attend a public event or not. Are you freaking kidding me with that? No, he's not. And man, I hate to say this again, and this should not be true. It should not be true. We did not do this to ourselves. China and organizations like EcoHealth, funded by NIH and NIAID, and whatever the hell they were doing in those labs, they did it to us. We didn't do this to ourselves. It shouldn't be the case. But lots of things in a fallen world that shouldn't be so are so. And so here we are. And I hate to say this again, I do. But the answer is us. And folks, this isn't going to end until we make it end. And not a moment sooner. I've got several speaking engagements lined up this fall. They're going to pay me thousands of dollars, frankly. Put a vaccine mandate on air travel, I'll just cancel them all. I'll eat that cost. Because I'm pretty confident in the long run I can make back the several thousands of dollars I'll lose not doing those speaking engagements. I control my destiny where that's concerned. I don't control my destiny with what happens when I re-inject a spike protein into my body just a few months after a fully recovered COVID infection. I have no control over that. My own mom texted me this morning. Remember, she went out and got vaccinated right away, and I urged her to back in January. And she's like, hey, man, I'm in my 60s. I have no immune system. I'm not getting one of these boosters. No freaking way. No way. I'm not signing up for just rebooster me over and over and over again with technology we don't know the long-term ramifications for. And now you've got former FDA officials and current World Health Organization officials writing papers together in The Lancet, which is a spirit of the age publication, frankly. And even they are sounding the alarm that the juice isn't worth the squeeze here, all right? Whatever benefit you think you're going to get from this is not worth the added anticipated risks of this fast of a rebooster program. Israel just took a look at the failure of Pfizer full vaccination in its country and just decided, well, now we're just gonna jab even harder. We're just gonna do it even more. No, you're not doing that to me. Not until you start telling me the truth about basic fundamentals of science. Where is natural immunity? What is the herd immunity threshold? You were able to study this virus so closely that you came up with these vaccines in, pardon the pun, warp speed. But you cannot answer those most fundamental questions of virology, biology, and immunology? No. Can't trust it, as the great prophet Flavor Flav said. Something's not right here. This isn't how this is supposed to work. Something's not right. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, as Aaron said in Chinese, I told you. That was our lament in March of 2020. Something's not right. Like we already had enough knowledge out of what happened in Italy. Fine if not China, but Italy. About the age demographics of this. We did not have to panic, but we wanted to. We've been on that track for a year and a half, and amongst the people that pull the most levers, it hasn't worn off. They can't get enough of it, and they're rubbing it in our faces, like at the Met Gala. In the pictures of Nancy Pelosi, 1 second in front of camera masked, the next second hobnobbing without. I can't help but just think about Loki. You were made to be ruled. How is a place called America tolerating this without knocking some teeth out?
You know, my supposition about the California recall election, assuming that this is just the most above-board election that we've ever seen, and your lament, Todd, are kind of one and the same here. One, there is just the spirit of the age, COVID stan. But then there's a lot of people who are on the fence, too, maybe. A lot of people out there who just don't want to admit that Voldemort is back, don't want to admit that they've been had.
Yep.
I hope there are people out there like that anyway, because at least maybe you can still change that a little bit. But at this point in this charade, you either get awoken to what's really happening here. I went back and I looked at this thread that I had put together in March of last year. Already, I mean, it was so fast. So fast, the tyranny was just coming down the pike so fast. We all saw, well, those of us who had eyes to see and ears to hear, we all saw where this was going. And it has gone there. And it can't stop and it won't stop. Again, how does this happen here? It's when people just let it go. Whether it's out of laziness or whether it's out of a fear of looking like you've been had. That's how it gets here.
Dr. Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins will join us here in a moment. So I know a lot of you that are listening right now or watching, you're just starting out, maybe buying a home, having babies, building wealth. Be sure to add securing your family's future to your to-do list by establishing a will or a trust at trustandwill.com. All right, trustandwill.com will help you with setting up an estate plan that is simple, convenient, and secure. For as little as $39, you can nominate guardians for your children, determine who gets your stuff, plan for future medical care, and all from the comfort of your home. And hiring a traditional estate attorney can sometimes cost thousands of dollars. Using a one-size-fits-all template is not nearly specialized enough. That's why you want to go with Trust and Will. Their documents are designed by estate planning experts and customized for the state you live in. And they offer live customer support for all 7 days a week. And trustandwill.com's team is available to answer any questions you have while setting up your estate. Trust and Will, it's your most trusted name in online estate planning, the category leader on Trustpilot, and they've helped hundreds of thousands of people protect their families' assets and legacy. So gain peace of mind right now at trustandwill.com. Again, that's trustandwill.com, and go to /Steve to get 10% off plus free shipping of your customized legal documents right now at trustandwill.com /Steve to get 10% off plus free shipping today at trustandwill.com /Steve. All right, let's get to Pop Culture Tuesday when we look at the intersection between pop culture and conservatism. So I can't believe I forgot to ask you guys this before the show. Have either one of you seen Shang-Chi yet? Have either one of you seen it?
No.
No.
Okay. And I know Aaron's got an excuse. He's got a baby. I guess Todd's got an excuse too. He's got a grown baby taking college visits. All right. So I'm looking right now at the top grossing films so far this year. Black Widow remains number one at $183.1 million. The latest Fast and Furious movie, there's been 9 of these, if you can believe it. It's number 2 at $172.9 million. A Quiet Place Part 2 at $160.07 million. And then number 4 is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at $144.5 million, despite only 2 weeks of release, and being released at right now, when you look at case counts and death counts, this is the worst the virus has been in the country since January. Since mid to late January, things are the worst they have been since then. Really, it's not even close. It's the worst it's been since then. And then you look at guys, Black Widow, known character, familiar, branded in the most popular series of movies in the country since Star Wars. Fast and Furious is, again, this is the 9th iteration of this franchise. A Quiet Place Part 2, so it's a sequel of an existing successful ongoing franchise. And then you've got this outlier here with a character almost nobody knew anything about and a storyline that very few people were familiar with. Just on the surface, does this maybe show, before we get into the movie itself, on the surface, does this maybe show that people might be yearning for original content out there?
I think they're yearning for anything that makes them feel nostalgic. And by that, I don't mean like Americana. I mean like just 3 years ago when Endgame came out and there was still some semblance of heroes and villains and light and dark. And
so transcendence is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's what it is to me. And even when it's a character you haven't heard of, there's a track record. I mean, I'd imagine I'm like most of America who love those movies. Steve, there's a lot of people like you, but I think you're still probably in the minority. I didn't know anything about Guardians of the Galaxy. I didn't know anything about Ant-Man and the Wasp, and those things just delivered and delivered again. So I think, who cares? I haven't heard of this thing. It was fun last time. It's going to be fun this time, and it's the kind of fun that, again, was not shoving agate prop in my face.
Aaron, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's... we can set aside the bread and circuses thing, the distractions as idolatry. I think it is. I think if we're looking at this as baby steps in the midst of everything else that we've been talking about, seeing people en masse go out and set a Labor Day weekend box office record, saying, you know, I want to go see this more than I'm afraid of this virus, or just not really caring anymore. I think that's a positive first step. That can't be the last step, though. I think that is a good thing. And then to what Todd said about learning, or yearning, I should say, for something transcendent, that's also true as well. And I was trying to think back of in the first phase of the MCU, which characters I had never heard of, and I realized basically most of them, and now they're like second nature. So I'm excited whenever I can actually see this. You know, maybe, I don't know if it's out on Disney Plus yet for a premiere membership, or maybe this weekend I'll try to get out to see it. But overall, I think it's a pretty positive first step. It just can't be the last step for this country.
Sure. I agree with you on that, Aaron. And Todd, I think you're onto something there with the appeal to transcendence. Now, I was aware, you know, who the Guardians of the Galaxy were. You know, I'd seen the comics, knew the characters to some degree, but I also thought they were fairly obscure, and a movie would have to be great for it to work. And the movie was great, and so it worked. As a comic book nerd growing up, I didn't know anything about Shang-Chi. In fact, I never even heard the word Shang-Chi until it was announced as a film by Marvel about 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't think I've ever talked about this before, but when I was a little kid, man, I definitely went through my Kung Fu phase. I loved the TV show. You know, I watched Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee movies. I was all into that kind of stuff for a good period of time in my younger elementary school days. I mean, and I was in a comic book, so I would have been like the target demo. I never heard of a Shang-Chi until Kevin Feige announced that this was going to be one of the first movies of Phase 4 of the Marvel Universe. So, you know, if I don't know who the character is, I would imagine there's a lot of dads with kids my age around the country that also had no idea who in the world this was. And they even brought back a villain they've already used, technically. They used the Mandarin, which is, you know, one of the all-time great villains in Marvel lore. They used him in Iron Man 3 as basically as an agitprop decoy, which the movie was greatly popular, infuriated people like me. And enough fanboys were infuriated that Marvel had to do like a one-shot movie a couple of years, about a year later, where they made it clear that the real Mandarin is actually still out there in the Marvel universe. Okay. And he's a total badass. So that's the Mandarin that you get in this film. He even references how he was impersonated in Iron Man 3. And they have a rather, I don't want to spoil it for those of you that haven't seen it, they have a rather unique way of how he handled that situation with Trevor Slattery, and it is dealt with and addressed in the film. And I'll leave it to those of you who haven't seen it yet to see that for yourselves. Okay. It's not quite the Mandarin that, you know, we saw Iron Man fight for so many years in the comics, but it is certainly a much more worthwhile iteration than what we were given in Iron Man 3. There's a lot of Eastern mysticism in the film, but there is also a lot of appeals to transcendence when it comes to honor, commitment, good and evil, family, things of that nature. So, Todd, you're right that it does appeal to sort of a wider yearning within the human soul and heart for redemptive themes and elements. It certainly appeals to that. I don't think it's the masterpiece film that some of the reviewers claimed. I would put it about on par with a Black Panther, which is a film I really liked, and I really liked this one. I mean, I don't think it's not Marvel's greatest origin story. It's a hell of a lot better story than Black Widow, but it's not as good as the Captain America, the first Avenger. It's not as good as the first Iron Man, for example. I don't even think it's as good as the first Ant-Man, actually. But it certainly is a worthwhile film, has some fantastic action scenes and fighting scenes. I actually think the first act of the film is the best act of the film, and is better than the final act, and the first act is phenomenal. But overall, it is worth your time. And the after credit scene, absolutely, I don't want to spoil that either, but it absolutely moves the narrative of Phase 4 much further along than any of the post-Avengers Endgame films have so far, which would be what, Black Widow, Spider-Man Far From Home. Was there another one I'm forgetting? And and it certainly moves it into the kinds of territories that were discussed, I think, that not necessarily dealing with time travel, but it moves it into a further acknowledgement of a new threat out there, similar to what you saw with the Loki television show. You guys have any thoughts or questions about that?
Well, the next movie is going to be the Eternals, right?
Yes.
So is there any door opened for where they come in, either specifically or theoretically?
See, I don't think we know, because the Eternals was supposed to be out like a year ago. It was supposed to be out before this film. That movie's been done for a while.
Interesting.
And the Eternals was really supposed to be the first film of Phase 4 that really moved the narrative on where Marvel's going in the future. But it got put off because of COVID, and so they ran with Shang-Chi instead first. Just like, Loki and those shows and WandaVision were actually supposed to come out after Eternals came out. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we're not really, I don't know that we really know how things are progressing on the overall meta front, Todd.
Oh, interesting.
Are there any mid or post-credit scenes?
Both the post-credit scenes are worth your while.
Okay.
The second one, I can just tell you that one if you don't want to stay for another 5 minutes of credits, if you're that impatient, although I think it's worth your time. But that one I can just tell you. The first post-credit scene, which comes mid-credits after the major cast credits and stuff are listed, you absolutely want to see that with your own eyes, because that tells you more about the 10 rings. These are different than the rings in the comics. In the comics, the Mandarin, I've always told you guys that almost everything in Marvel is a derivative of DC. The Mandarin is actually a villainous derivative of Green Lantern. All right. And so a villainous character comes upon not one ring, like Green Lantern does with the fallen lantern Abin Sur, and he gets his Green Lantern singular ring. In this case, the character that becomes known as the Mandarin, Wenwu, comes upon 10 rings that that encased in them are like, I think it's like the souls or something of 10 different alien warriors that like signify different attributes of a warrior. And he chooses to use them for evil instead of Green Lantern using his ring for good. And in this case, because we just went through, the Infinity Stones that were worn like rings on an Infinity Gauntlet, they turned them into bracelets. They also mimic, sort of a martial arts bracelets, strength bracelets that they use in some forms of martial arts. So they kind of combine those two things. So they're not really rings, they're more bracelets. And they kind of reference the origin of them from the comics, but they don't really go into it specifically. But the after credit scene that you definitely want to see, the first one, definitely hints at something else. And I don't want to spoil that for you. I think you should see that on your own.
And how about the actor? He seems fine in the commercials. Is this a guy that can become a sort of household name based on his charisma?
You were going to, you know what? And is it, what's it? I forgot his name. Is it Simon Liu or something like that is his name? There's a great story about this guy where for money, he was appearing in like Getty Image stock photos. And before he had his acting break, and now people are going back and finding him in these in these stock photos and turning him into memes, into funny memes. So his character is extremely likable. Is she a love interest? Is she a friend? Awkwafina's character is a little overdone at times, but is overall very likable too. So, and they make it very clear in the film that this is going to be a character that's going to be very involved in the overall Marvel story going forward. They make that very clear. And that's before the film made $144 million. Guys, $144 million without a pandemic in 2 weeks in September would be incredible. I mean, this is already, way beyond. I predicted it would shatter the Labor Day record. It's gone way beyond that. I mean, 144 million in September, no matter a pandemic or not, is an incredible amount of money, let alone with what's going on right now with Delta and everything else.
So does this guy does he know Kung Fu at the beginning of the movie, or does he end up knowing Kung Fu because it's magic?
If I answer that question, it would spoil it for you. Okay.
But I'm over the target then. I'm over the target.
But I don't want to answer it for you.
Got it.
Okay. All right, so you guys know that I love me some Built Bar. So before I get out of here, let me tell you about one of my absolute all-time favorite products. It is the greatest protein bar you've ever had, and it's better than the vast majority of candy bars you've ever tried, but without all the sugar, carbs, fat, and calories. Phenomenal everyday flavors you can get, like salted caramel, cookies and cream is one of their most popular flavors. I love peanut butter brownie, mint brownie, and then there's the specialty flavors. After the show today, I've got a chocolate chip cookie dough with my name on it sitting right here on my desk waiting for me. All right, so if you want to try Built Bar, and we're getting into the fall. Last year, they brought out pumpkin chocolate chip. They brought out white chocolate walnut. They brought out several different flavors for fall last year and the holidays. Maybe they'll do that again this year. All right. So get on board with Built Bar right now. Go to their website, built.com, BUILT. Use my last name, Deace, as your promo code at DEACE and get 15% off your order with the promo code DEACE when you go to built.com. If you love Mounds Joy candy bars, that the coconut Built Bar, I promise you, if I cut out a piece of that coconut Built Bar with a piece of Mounds Joy, you might not be able to tell the difference. That's how good it is. Built.com, promo code DEACE. Gentlemen,
and that's appropriate. We lost Steve right at the end of the show.
Good grief.
That is great. Now Steve
There
is
he
back.
You froze up there, brother.
I saw that I froze up. Did I get Built Bar in with the promo code
Oh, yeah,
before that
did.
happened?
Yeah,
That's all good.
Okay, that's more important than anything we were going to say, right?
that's true. That's very true. One more quick question about Shang-Chi. Any cameos?
Yeah.
Just yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we might have to get
And I'll say this. At first, you think the cameos you see are irrelevant to the story, but you find out later they're not. So,
Cool.
little hint there. All right.
Very cool.
All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck here on Blaze TV. Until then, John 3:17.